Hi, guys. Welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for watching today's show. Today's a very fun episode for you guys and for me as well. Today, I have on the show author and travel blogger Anuradha Goyal. Anuradha ji, welcome to the show.
Namaste, and thank you so much for having me, Sham.
Absolutely, it's absolutely my pleasure. So, one of the things that when I was looking at some of the stuff that you do is, of course, your travel blog Inditales, which it's one of the best ways to really know India because it's
Thank
coming
you so
from
much.
an Indic perspective and B from a person that has traveled across India quite extensively. So tell us a little bit about Inditales and your mission or your goals behind creating Inditales.
Okay, so I'll take you back to a little bit of how
Sure.
Inditales was born. So I grew up in middle class India, always chasing science, studying science, ending up in IT industry. But I have to thank IT industry because they gave me the grounding to travel a lot.
Right.
And while I was traveling and I was, discovering India and the world, I started writing the travel blog way back in 2004. So it's been 14 years and probably it's India's longest living travel blog.
Right.
So I started writing, and as I started writing, I also started traveling more. And more than traveling more, I started observing far more because I had to see and come back and write.
Right.
And and that cycle led to my readers enriching my travels. I have like million examples of where my readers have come and told me, if you're going there, you must see this, you must see this, or somebody would come around and take me for a walk, or somebody would show me something unique which I don't know. So this spiral kind of went on. And what happened in this process is that I started discovering India. Of course, I've traveled outside India also to many countries, but India, I started discovering the way I had never imagined in my life.
Right.
I started connecting with a lot. In fact, for example, I grew up in North India primarily, and my only information about South India was from my grandmother's pilgrimage trip. She had traveled to all the South Indian states on a pilgrimage tour, and she had told me stories of how temples are in South India, what people wear, and how do they worship, which was very different from how North Indians did at least 25, 30 years ago.
Right.
So, and that gave me a dream that one day I want to see that. And if you were a child who was born in pre-internet era, pre-mobile phone era, we had no visuals of to imagine how things were. Visuals
Right.
were created by these narratives that earlier travelers gave. So I started discovering a lot of it. And I also started discovering that a lot of stuff that I wish I was taught at school, you know. So my initial response was that why was I not taught about this? For example, in Assam, when I discovered about a home kingdom, which is probably the longest ruling dynasty in India, and I said, why did they never teach me about it in the school?
Yeah.
But then I kept discovering things. I said, oh, we have so much history that they couldn't have taught it all to us.
Right.
But that is when I started discovering, and I also started discovering, I started connecting the dots. And I started discovering what connects us as Indians, despite our languages being different, despite us following so many different forms of our culture, so many different forms of even our religion.
Right.
What connects us? What I figured out was that we have a very broad framework, and this exists in our performing arts very well. If
Right.
you see our music, so every rag has a certain structure which must be followed, but within that, whatever variations you want, you can do as a
Right.
musician. So the same goes for our other cultural threads as well. So there's a broad structure that you follow. So for example, let's say the story of Ramayana.
Right.
The broad story remains the same. The nuances change with every region. Any of our stories, ancient stories, the broad things remain same. How a deity depicted, or how in our let's say stone sculptures, which is probably our most a valuable remaining tangible heritage. So let's look at Buddha. So if you see Buddha images from, let's say, Mathura School of Art, which you can see in Mathura Museum, they're very different from what you see down south, or what you see even in the eastern part of the country.
Hmm.
The Buddha suddenly becomes, gets the features of the local thing, but his basic icons remain the same.
Right.
you know so you will never mistake him for anybody else if you know the basics of how to identify a Buddha or a Shiva or a Vishnu or anything. So I started discovering these things connecting, and it and my own connection with the country became stronger. I don't
Right.
think I connected as a India connected to India as an Indian so strongly before I traveled so extensively. I mean, I did connect. I was always a proud Indian.
Right.
But today I feel so deeply rooted in India.
What was it about traveling that gave you that connection? What was it about traveling through India in particular that gave you that sort of connection?
I think everywhere where you go, you discover a thread of living civilization. you
Yes.
know and somewhere I think, because of whatever reasons, because of us being colonized or us being invaded, uh, somewhere a lot of connections were severed, and we were not aware of it.
Hmm.
So for my traveling has taken me to the places where they reconnect you, and I have seen it. A lot of times, younger travelers or younger traveler bloggers, when they travel with me, and I show them things, and I see that not just with me. The moment people start seeing those connections, it's like reconnecting with your roots, and then growing with your roots through your roots, rather. So
Right.
it's like being a rootless person to being connected to the roots, and then those roots nurturing you to grow and flourish.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the difference.
I think so. And one of the very interesting things I found about traveling myself is, we spoke about this briefly before as well, that there is, everybody in the world, regardless of who you are, has certain preconceived notion and has certain ideas in their heads about places and things and people. But one of the great things about traveling is it shatters all those preconceived notions that you may or may not have had. Is when you travel, you meet people and you talk to people, and you feel the connection that you have with, everybody else in the country. And one of the big problems India has, according to me, is regionalism. And
Mhm.
traveling goes a very long way in destroying that regionalism, because you go and meet all these people in all these different states, and you see that you have much more in common than
Mhm.
you thought, and you have much more in common than you have, different from each other.
Right.
So I wonder if you found that as well.
Oh, yes, all the time. Every travel demolishes some myths that are built by just reading or listening to others. And let me tell you a non India example. When I
Sure.
traveled to Jordan, and this was the first Islamic country I was visiting. So I Googled and Googled, as a woman, what can you wear, what you should wear, or what you should not wear. And they were all kind of saying you must be covered head to toe, kind of things, and lot of things. I went there and I figured out that whatever I wear normally in India would have worked easily. There
Oh,
was
wow.
nothing like it, you know. And unfortunately, even people from my own fraternity had written as if you're going to be jailed there if you do something. So a lot of these things get demolished when you actually go and see. Uh, uh, Within India or even outside India, the travel is something that it's very difficult to hate people you've visited.
Right.
You just think about all the places you've visited and all the people you've met. It is very difficult. So for me, I would I would take all the terrorists of the world and make them travel and fall in love with people so that they can't do anything to people.
Right.
So the biggest thing is that it builds a human bond. It builds a human bond, and it's very difficult to not like, unless they do something specifically for you to dislike them.
Yeah.
Most people are nice. I mean, in general, the world is nice with exceptions, rather than the other way around, as the media wants us to believe.
Right. It's so true. And there's that concept in India, of Koop Manduk or Kuwe ka Mendak. And
Mhm.
that is such a that it's such a relevant concept in this conversation as well, because most of the people that you see who have very strident views about other people, who have all these crazy views about other people, they are people who have not traveled a lot. They are
Right,
people who have never left their hometown and stayed in their
right,
hometown their whole lives, and
right,
so they have these weird notions about everybody else. And that's what I find about people who travel, that they have a much more nuanced opinion about things, because they've actually seen places, they've actually
right,
seen people, they've actually talked to people, and they
right,
can relate to other people who may or may not see eye to eye with them, but they can still relate to them as people. You know what I mean?
right, right, right. In fact, I'll be very happy if Indians start traveling within their own backyard.
Right.
This is something I'm really, really passionate about. That, if you live in Delhi or Mumbai, these are cities with amazing layers of history. Amazing layers of history. Delhi has been there since the days of Mahabharata, and since then it has been a living city.
Right.
Or if you go to Actually, if you go to any city, including the city I come from, Chandigarh, which is so-called a modern city, but if you really dig the layers, it had a city from Indus Valley civilization beneath it.
Right.
So if you can start traveling within your own backyard, you will start discovering so much, and you will not just discover the history of the place, you will discover the history of the people who've come from outside and settled in that place. you know
Right.
so you will discover so many communities living in. I remember I went for a walk which I have written about. It's called melting pot walk in Calcutta. Now this is a small place within Calcutta where all the small communities of from around the world are settled.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like the world living within this city, and I don't know how many people go and explore that. So it's not important. I mean, a lot of times people think that you need a lot of money and you need a lot of resources to travel. You can just take a walk in your own backyard and you'll discover so much of world, because we are such an old living civilization. Every part of India has so much history.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's very true. And one of the other things, that I really enjoy about Inditales in particular is,
Mhm.
I live in the US, and I have a lot of people that I know here that want to travel to India, and they keep telling me, "Oh, I would love to go and see India. I'd love to go and see India." And but they when they talk to me about traveling to India, they say some very strange things that I always think to myself, where did you hear this about India? Where
Hmm.
they come and say all these strange things to me, and I always wonder, where did you hear this? But what I've come to realize, which makes sense at the end of the day, is that all of these people, when they think about going to India, they go and research on blogs and YouTube and so on and so forth, and all they're getting is sort of people from the same part of the world, foreign people writing about traveling to India. And
Mhm.
it's still a foreign perspective. These are people who've been to maybe a couple of places in India, and they'll tell you, okay, this is where you go to get the perfect Instagram shot, this is where you go to to see this or see that. But it's, again, what I like about Inditales in that aspect is that it is from an Indian person who has traveled extensively through India, and they know, some of the they know all the important touristy places, of course, but they know how to travel in India safely, how to travel in India efficiently, and how to truly get the Indian experience. You know what I mean? So that's what I really like about In Details. And talk to us a little bit about that, sort of difference from a foreigner visiting India and then blogging about India, to an Indian traveling through India and then blogging about it.
Okay, so I think the difference lies between whether you are doing it in whether you're following a fixed itinerary,
Right.
in which case you've already decided what you want to see, and then you see exactly that and go back.
Right.
So you essentially seeing what you've seen on the internet, and then you go and experience it yourself, you'll still get a lot more than what you have read, but you may not get much more than that. So
Right.
I always say, this is how I plan my itinerary. So if I'm going to a new place, I will read about it. I'll of course do all the touristy things. I'll of course do the second tier of touristy things, but then I leave about 30-40% of my time for surprise discoveries, for just walking around the place, for meeting people, for getting some local tip on what to do. So if you can budget some amount in your travel itinerary uh, for chance discoveries, and they're always there. Every
Right.
travel, if you leave an unstructured space, you will always surprise yourself, or the destination will always surprise you. So
Right.
leave that space. Most travelers, because they're trying to make most out of their trip, they end up planning to the last minute. Okay.
Right.
Sometimes they don't even budget for any potential delays or disruptions or anything. So allow that a little bit, and you will have a lot of experiences. Now, with me, what has happened? I have traveled extensively in the country, and now the kind of strong connect I have with the country, I feel you can throw me anywhere and I'll survive and thrive. So I know how to connect with. I mean, it's my own country, so I know
Right.
how to connect with people. I also know how people are going to, uh, you know, attempt misleading you somewhere.
Right.
So I know the soul of this country. So for me, it's perfectly fine. But if you are a newbie in the country, I still allow for that time, which lets you discover some chance discoveries. And what you will discover, you never know. You can visit
Yeah.
a place, like for example Banaras. I can visit that place any number of times, and I know there will be surprises.
Right.
you know so that's what it is.
Right. Right. And I wanted to talk a little bit about there's if you're anywhere overseas, you're going to hear this a lot, saying that, okay, I really want to travel in India, but I've heard it's very unsafe. I really
Mm.
want to go here and I really want to go there, but
Mhm.
it's so unsafe. And that's sort of the prevalent narrative. The media pushes it a lot. International media pushes it a lot, for good or bad reasons. And f- first of all, being a woman traveling through the country, often by yourself, what has, number one, been your experience, and what would you tell the publications that are publishing, that are pushing sort of this whole narrative of that India is very unsafe to travel in? And what would you tell people that are thinking of coming to India, but they're hearing all these stories?
Okay, so first of all, my belief is that India is as safe or unsafe as any other destination in the world.
Right.
In fact, if you go by the statistics of uh, uh, violence against women, we have about 60-70 countries above us in
Right.
terms of per capita, this thing. So there's no reason for us to be unsafe. Of course, there are. You have to be culturally connected to a place. So I just did a post on safe travel tips for solo travelers, and one of my tips is that one, merge with the destination. Do not try to stand out in a destination, either visually, which is through how you dress up, or through your mannerism or your attitude or your body language. The moment you stand out anywhere, you attracting attention, and you're attracting, you're making yourself vulnerable,
Right.
right? And this is true across the world, not just in India.
Right.
Now, India, being, we have our own cultural norms, so just follow them. Then try to speak a little bit of the local language, even if it's like 4 words. Because that the moment you attempt speaking 4 local words, even if you pronounce them whichever way,
Yeah.
the signal you're telling, giving to the people is that I'm trying to be you. I'm trying
Right.
to learn about you. They may laugh at you, but then they will trust you. That works. Uh, and third thing, I sometimes feel that travelers, especially when they come from so-called first world, they come with an attitude, you know,
Right.
and they are not as respectful as they should be. And I'll
Mm.
give you an example. I was taking one of my European friends. We were in the deep interiors of Karnataka exploring, and this is 10 years back. Okay, so now this person was obviously a white person. She stood out. She's been clicking photographs, through the day, clicking people through the day. But the
Mm.
moment people clicked her photos, she was offended. How can they click my photograph without taking my permission? And all I had to tell her was, did you take permission before clicking their pictures?
Right.
You're probably going to make money out of their pictures. Did you take permission? If you didn't take permission, then they are not obliged to take your permission. So be respectful to people. The basic tenet being, you will get what you give. If you
Right.
are respectful, I mean, I have had so many cases where typical people that people are afraid of, like drivers, or people who are doing, let's say, blue collar jobs. I have had cases where those people have become protective for me. They've invited me home. They have fed me if I was not getting proper food in a place where there are no restaurants or something.
Right.
I have so many examples of kindness on the road, and it is just because they felt they could trust me, or I could trust them, or they established the fact that I could trust them just by giving them respect. So respect is a big weapon for women traveling.
Right.
A lot of time I have seen that women, when the urban women go to rural, and it's not about regionalism, but it's more about urban rural divide. When they go to the rural, they simply think they are better off. And that shows, even if they are polite in their words, it shows in the body language.
Right.
You have to mean respect. And then if you give respect, it's very difficult for the other person to attack you, except in a chaos situation, except in a riot situation where everybody loses their head. So
Yeah.
keeping aside those special conditions, in average conditions, the moment you respect somebody, the moment you call them G, you've killed their intentions, any bad intentions they had for you. Except maybe cheating you, in terms of financially cheating you, that
Sure.
they try to maximize their gains out of you
Right.
because you're a visitor, which you learn to deal with, or which is fine. I mean, once in a while, if you get cheated.
Yeah, it's fine. And
Yeah.
for what would you tell people that are especially younger people in India that don't travel much? What would you tell them in terms of uh, traveling, and why? What would you give them an advice in terms of why they should be traveling, exploring their country more, especially to the younger people?
I think the younger generation is traveling much more
Or is
than
it?
our generation did. Yes, they are traveling quite a bit. I see a lot of people saving up, earning to travel, and taking breaks to travel. So they're definitely traveling far more than my generation was, or generations before me was. But we still have this craze that we have to go and see Europe. We have to go and
Right.
see these, top 20 destinations, because they see, I mean, there is a hierarchy associated with tourism destination. What
Sure.
I want a youngster to do is start exploring their own backyards, explore their city, explore their state, explore their country, and then definitely go and explore the world, because there is so much to learn from the world as well. But appreciate your own backyard as well. So that's what I want. They're definitely traveling more, traveling well, and traveling more than we traveled.
Oh, wow. What I find really interesting, and we talked about this recently as well, and you mentioned something that I think bears repeating here as well, that we were talking about, the sort of concept of dhams, and how there's a concept of dham in India, that there's the char dhams that you must go visit before you die. And I wonder if it's something, if again and again, I'm speculating, but I wonder if it's something to do with being able to travel different parts of your country, so you get acquainted with your country really well, and you understand your country before you actually die. I wonder if it has some sort of connection to that.
I think it definitely has. I think that's kind of a travel goal that you are born with if you are born in India, that you have to visit four dhams, which are located in four different directions. And assuming that you couldn't fly to those destinations, you would go by road. So if
Right.
you are, if which wherever you are located, you will end up seeing the whole of country. And if you're a little more adventurous, you can travel 12 Jyotirlings, which are also spread across, but they take you to smaller routes. Even more 51 Shakti Peeths. Even more, you have these yatras, which are walking trails, like you have Narmada Yatra, which you do across the Narmada River walking, which is roughly about 3,005 kilometers, 500 kilometers walking, or a Panchkroshi Yatra around Kashi, or a Panchkroshi Yatra around Ayodhya, So you have this whole list of yatras that you can do. But the first thing is you do Char Dham, you get acquainted, or you get, let's say, exposed to the country. And then depending on your, various other things, you may take up the rest of the yatras.
Right.
So I definitely think that must have bound us together. That must have bound us together, and also it would have given an exposure. So you have to, if you really look at it, we were basically a country of entrepreneurs. We really didn't have this concept of somebody, I will study for 20 years and then somebody will come and give me a job. We didn't have that concept. In fact, nowhere in the world that concept existed. We were a country of entrepreneurs. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're pursuing a business, you're probably doing business with other parts of the country or other parts of the world. So this is also an exposure of new opportunities available. I mean, there is no way you will miss, if you are a businessman, there is no way you will miss out on a opportunity that you meet on the way while you are traveling around.
Right.
And you'll be surprised if you look at the souvenir shops around these pilgrimage places. You literally find something that is found in Nepal, you'll find in all possible pilgrimage places, or something in the south, you'll find it in all possible places. How did that happen? It must have happened with people traveling or travelers conducting the trade. So definitely it was to let people explore the country, in the process connect with the people, and explore opportunities in whichever way they could use later on.
Right. There's a very interesting question here from one of the audience members, Rudra Pratap Sinha. He's asking, do you have any tips for introverted travelers?
Yes, so travel is done for two primary reasons. One is to engage with the world, and one is to disengage with the world.
Right.
So this is the spectrum in which travel happens. So there are people who want to disengage. So if you're really stressed out, really overworked, you may want to switch off, go to one corner of the world where nobody can reach you. There are no mobile towers.
Right.
And you stay there. But having said that, it's introverted doesn't mean that you cannot do mainstream travel. Introverted only means that you may not like interacting with people as much as so-called extroverts do.
Right.
But you can still observe the world. In fact, introverts are far better observers than extroverts.
Right. It's true. It's true. I think they can still enjoy the travel part of it. Maybe not as much the interaction part of it, but I think
Right.
traveling and observing is still a very important thing for people to be able to do. And
Right.
you spoke about India being a country of entrepreneurs, and I wanted to.
In fact,
Sorry, go ahead.
One second. Yeah, I want to say solo travel is actually a very introverted way of traveling.
That's right, and I know that for a fact as well, because I used to travel solo quite a bit, and I used to really enjoy travel. I enjoy traveling with my friends as well, but I
Right.
really did enjoy traveling solo when I got the chance as well. So I think I
Right.
completely agree with you there.
Right.
So again, shifting focus a little bit, we were talking about. You said India being a country of entrepreneurs, and I think that brings us to what I wanted to talk about next. You've written a book called The Mouse Charmers as well, which is a book that discusses digital pioneers in India and talks about, companies like Flipkart, companies like Make My Trip, Shadi.com, Zomato,
Right.
and companies that have really made a mark and really found success in
Right.
the internet sphere, particularly in the internet sphere. And I feel like this is an area that has such a massive potential, around the world, not just in India, but around the world. There's so much potential for entrepreneurs to create a valid business model and create a good life for themselves via the internet. And what were some of the things that you found that these countries that these companies, excuse me, that you studied, what were some of the things that you found that they were doing well in the internet sphere? Because there's a lot of companies that fall by the wayside as well.
Right, right. So, all the successful companies that were studied, uh, they had. So, my book. Let me start by explaining how it's
Sure.
structured. There are three types of digital entrepreneurs. One is e-commerce, which is essentially, selling something online, which you can
Right.
find offline as well, but you're selling it online. Okay. The second is the content creators. So content is a big thing, So content was a very constrained thing before the internet era.
Right.
So, a newspaper had, let's say, 24 pages, a television had 24 hours, a radio station had 24 hours, which they could fill.
Right.
So if there is anything more that came, something else had to get out,
Right.
you know. You know, so internet really opened up the space. There is no limit, which also means that there is no quality check on the content.
Right.
You know, so content was one category of entrepreneurs. And the third category is community. Now that really didn't exist before internet era because it was not possible, or if it existed in terms of industry bodies, in terms of special interest groups, but not really at a scale at which the internet allows them to, a community. For example, let's say shadi.com. Now it's a community of people looking for a life partner
Right.
at that point in time. Okay. And look at the options it gives you. Okay. So I started about 4 companies each in each of these 3 categories. And the biggest learning was that some of them had picked up the models that were working in the West. Let's say e-commerce, let's say Flipkart was trying to be the Amazon of India.
Right.
And now, why could they really cut paste? Not really. So the Flipkart's biggest contribution to Indian e-commerce is their cash on delivery, which is unique in India, which is pretty much unique in India. And if they had not experimented, today our e-commerce economy would be probably at 20% of what it is.
Wow.
When they started, this is the statistics are about 5-6 years old, but credit card penetration in India was less than 1%.
Right.
Right. And even when people had a credit card, they were really wary of using it
Use.
online. Even today they are.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but for cash on delivery, now, it seems very simple. And a lot of people will say, Indian Post always had a VPP, which was pretty much cash on delivery. But they couldn't do it on the scale. And they couldn't do it with the speed with which they do. So even today, if you look at statistics, majority of Indian e-commerce happens on cash on delivery and on the guarantee that returns will be taken.
Right.
Okay, so Indianizing or localizing any business idea and picking up the local problems. For example, let's say shadi.com. Now, I don't know if there's the concept like this exists anywhere else in the world. So they picked up a very Indic problem that parents have of finding the right match for their son or daughter, and they have provided it a scale. And if you really see their journey, they started with probably a directory mode where you just have listing and people can pick and choose and then get in touch. But then at every step they kept meeting problems. People, they were fake profiles. People could use the profile to trouble people. So, and they kept working on that, and today they have such a robust system that a fake profile probably cannot stay online for more than few hours.
Right.
With the checks and balances in place. So 2 things. One is find out a problem that really needs a solution, give a local solution. Cut-paste solutions do not work, at least they do not work in India. The third is, of course, as a business, you have to keep pivoting. Pivoting is the main thing. A lot of these businesses started as something else in mind.
Right.
So, for example, I know the founders of commonflow.com, which used to be a property portal, and it's merged with another property portal recently. But they started with something else in mind, completely different. But then they kept listening to their customers, and they kept pivoting around what the customer wants and what the customer is willing to pay for. Not just what the customer wants, but what the customer is willing to pay for. And to find that sweet spot where what you like to do and what customers are willing to pay, and then build on top of that, is where the success lies.
Right.
And not be really a lot of young entrepreneurs I see. I mean, for my Inditales blog, a lot of travel startup get in touch with me, and the first question I ask them is, what is your business model? How are you making money? And 90% of them will say, oh, don't worry about our money, we are not even thinking of making money. And I tell them, if you are not thinking of making money, I'm not associating with you, because if you don't make money, how are you going to pay me?
Right.
And they say, no, you should be bothered about your money. Why are you bothered about my money? Or the bragging factor is, I got so much funding.
Right.
I have so much funding. Now, funding is not, funding is interesting, important, but that's not something to brag about. So I think you should have a very, very clear business model of where the money is coming from, who's going to pay for you, and then go and test it if somebody is actually willing to pay for it. A lot of times in our head, we think people are going to pay for it. And nobody is really interested in paying for it unless it's solving some of their problems.
Right. Absolutely. You spoke about one of the aspects being content creators, and one of the this is the big area where a lot of sort of Indic entrepreneurs are finding themselves in the content creation sort of arena and the content creation area. And so there's a lot of people now creating content, and there's a lot of people now finding that there's actually a potentially profitable business model in content creation, in creating like a media platform. And there's some outlets on the left in India that have already taken that step, in creating media companies, in creating content creation media companies. And some of them are more established than others, but they're starting to find success. In the Indic sphere, it is still a relatively sort of unorganized sector, and they're still working to find their groove, find their footing, and so on and so forth. Do you have any recommendations for Indic entrepreneurs who want to create a business or a media platform and focus on content creation or content curation or something like that?
Okay, so see, it depends on the content niche.
Sure.
Let me talk about the blogging.
Sure.
So in the blogging circles, if you really take them by verticals, tech bloggers make a lot of money. And that is because every time you buy a technology product, you go and check the review online. Right, and you take the recommendations of somebody who's established as a reviewer. Okay. Now switch to something like books. I run India's biggest book reviews blog, and I make zero money out of it because that's not a niche where people spend money.
Right.
Okay. On my travel blog, I make some money because that's a space where people spend money. Okay. So in the content space, you have to identify your niche. Now your motivation for creating media platforms can be different. One could be to disseminate knowledge, one could be to change narrative, one could be to take on an agenda, or it could be to make money.
Right.
Okay. So if you are in the make money business, then you have to find a niche where people pay. As simple as that. But if you are trying to, let's say, change a narrative, or if you are trying to build a body of, let's say, literature or a body of work in a space which does not exist.
Right.
So for example, like this, I think IT Kanpur is doing, they're digitizing all Indian scriptures.
Right.
Okay. Now that needs to be done. Will somebody pay for it? Probably no.
Right.
So you have to, it depends on the content. So if there is a content which people will pay you for example, if people are willing to pay Sham Sharma for this show,
Right.
then it's great. If they are not willing to pay, then you have to find an alternate way, because otherwise you'll not be able to sustain it.
Sure.
Either somebody has to fund it, or somebody has to give you a fellowship or something like that. So it depends on that. Having said that, the main source of revenue for purely content creators still remains advertising.
Right.
It's primarily advertising. We haven't really innovated to find another ways. The only example I can think of is Zomato,
Right.
uh, which is basically a content company. I mean, they've recently started delivering
Yeah.
food, but before that, they were basically content company. So they had a very niche content about something that is searched a lot.
Right.
So every time people want to go out for meal, they are searching for food options. So it was something which is very well searched. And then they had a beautiful thing. You should read about Zomato in the Mouse Charmers. So they have this core layer where they upload the menus and upload the basic information about the restaurant, which is like it's a veg, non-veg, AC, non-AC, this, that, all the classifications, timings, open timings, whatever. So they have the basic information, and then they have a beautiful user generated layer
Right.
wrapping around that. So, which is a constantly evolving layer. So everybody who goes there, and they're beautifully linked it to some kind of a user glorification, or kind of a model where people keep putting data to their
Right.
system. So they beautifully built that, and because they are hyper niche, so you are, let's say, located in Goregaon in Mumbai, in a particular area. So they pick up your location, and they're hyper niche. So
Right.
they're making money, and they're serving a need, which is a need for everybody on this planet 3 times a day. you know
Right.
so unless you are serving that kind of a niche, being a pure play media platform, you can't be earning a lot. You may be able to sustain yourself,
Yeah.
uh, but you can't build a team and do something. But I have seen, for example, somebody in the Bollywood space is doing it very well.
Yeah.
That content again sells very well. Like it or not, it may be absolute junk content, but it sells.
Yeah.
So uh, and sometimes half of it is fake anyways.
Yeah.
Half of it is not even true, but that's the kind of content that gets sold, and people are willing to pay for it. By the way, those organizations also don't make too much money out of the normal Google AdSense model. They all make money because uh, film promotion budget comes to them,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you have to be in a niche where people are willing to pay you to listen to your content. Otherwise, I would say, I think across the world, even the best shows, best selling shows also don't make money on their own.
Right.
I mean, I'm
I
not aware of an example.
you're absolutely actually right, because you notice there's a lot of these so talking about, let even if we're talking about sort of political or cultural based shows, Indic shows in the United States, it's an interesting thing as well, because there's a lot of these, people and platforms and media companies that are in the sort of political sphere or in the cultural sphere, that talk about various issues, about changing the narrative and so on and so forth, that have that have become very popular over the past few years, and they've developed a subscription model where they've said that, okay, we're not that they also don't just rely on AdSense and the ad
Mhm.
revenues. They say that, okay, if you like the work that we do, if you would like us to continue creating content, if you would like us to continue fighting the good fight and helping change the narrative,
Mhm.
then excuse me, then you can subscribe to our show for a certain amount of money per month or per year, which
Mhm.
allows us to be able to continue to work. We don't have to worry about finding other jobs, and we can keep creating content for you. And that sort of subscription model, it's found a lot of success, particularly here in the United States and in Europe. So I think there's a lot of potential for that sort of subscription model in India as well. What do you think about that?
I think we have a long way to go.
You
You
do?
know, I think so, because I'll tell you, I get approached on a daily basis by 5 to 10 companies which want me to be their affiliates.
Right.
And affiliate does not work.
Right.
If even if I recommend a book, people will not click on my affiliate and buy. They will, while they end up paying the same amount of money, they
Right.
will go compare on 5 different websites and then choose the best.
Yeah.
That's how we Indians are. I'm not condemning it. I'm not, I mean, I would do the same. So we are a very, very value conscious market. you
Right.
know if I can pay 10 rupees less for a book, I will spend those 10 minutes to find that best deal. you know
Right.
so affiliates do not work here. I don't think subscriptions will work, because people will always find a way to see it the other way around. uh, unless you become something like a Netflix.
Right.
You start coming on Netflix, where people pay Netflix and then Netflix pays you a part of it. Even that, we'll have to see how successful platforms like Netflix in India are. So India is a very value conscious market, and even in US, I a couple of shows that I follow, I mean, they keep asking for it, but nobody knows how much they get.
Right.
We know that they have the uh, they have the infrastructure in place for people to help them, but nobody has really published their earnings report like some bloggers do.
Right.
And of the people I know, I do not know of anybody who's published their revenue report and said, this is what my subscribers are paying me. So, and if nobody has done that, you can be very sure that it's not enough.
Right. There's another thing that a lot of people talk about often. They say that, especially companies and entrepreneurs who are trying to get started and get some visibility, they said, oh, we spend a lot of money on advertising and so on and so forth, YouTube advertising, Twitter advertising, Facebook
Mhm.
advertising. And uh, do you think there's a difference between spending money on advertising for visibility and actual engagement? And how do you think people can actually, get engagement, get visibility, but also get engagement? Because a lot of people get visible, but that doesn't mean that the audience that is watching them or the people that are watching them are necessarily engaging with them. And I feel like revenue at the end of the day comes after people are actually engaged in your content.
Uh, right. So one is pure play marketing, which is what Google AdSense is,
Hmm.
and which I think Google AdSense still has no competition. I mean, though people also use Facebook advertising, but the way Facebook algorithms are behaving at the moment,
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense for any business to advertise there.
Right.
you know Honestly, I don't, unless it's again very hyper local thing that you want to do. That's the only thing that works. But yes, the brand building works just like in the offline world. So the bigger your brand is, the more people know about you, the more people are engaged, and the more engaged they are, the more they are willing to buy something that you sell. It
Right.
could be content, it could be an idea, it could be a concept, or it could be a product.
Right.
So
Right.
it works just like it works in the offline world.
Right. Right. No, that's absolutely correct as well. And I just feel like that's an interesting concept. The concept of sort of uh, visibility versus engagement is a big one for a lot of people that I hear. Especially in the sort of Indic areas that are starting out. They say, "Oh, we spend a lot of money on advertising," and a lot of them spend their money on Facebook. So you would say right now that Facebook isn't really value for money in terms of advertising dollars spent or advertising money
See,
spent?
again, depends what are you trying to
Sure,
achieve.
sure.
But Facebook, if it's suppressing all kinds of organic reach, which means unless you pay it, it is not going to show your content to anybody.
Sure.
Almost nobody. I have like 150,000 plus followers on my Inditales page, and my engagement is like 200.
Right.
A reach rather, not even engagement, like,
Sure.
which is unrealistic in whichever way. So Facebook is obviously controlling it.
Right.
Okay. So I would be willing to pay, and that's what I like about Google as a company. One, they are making money, and any business that's making money is worth working with.
Sure.
Facebook is struggling to make money. Instagram is struggling to make money, and people are making money. So if I'm an Instagram influencer, a lot of companies would pay me, but then companies pay me directly. They don't pay me through Instagram,
Through Instagram. Yeah.
right? So Instagram is not making money in the process.
Right.
Okay. Facebook is suppressing my organic reach so much that uh, unless I pay them, I am nowhere.
Right.
you know Also, even if I pay them, I have no idea how many people will actually say it. So
Right.
to that extent, dependability is not. And my basic, I mean, I'm a bania, so I my basic my basic instinct is work with people who are making money,
Yeah.
because they will sustain for a long term. you
Right.
know
Right.
Anybody who's not making money is not going to sustain for a very long time, no matter uh, how much clout they have created around you.
Sure. Sure. And before we go, and do you have any, you said something about brand building, which I found very interesting. Do you have any sort of advice for people who are starting out in terms of how they can help build their brands?
So one is stay within your niche, whatever your niche is. You may be doing 10 things, but if you
Right.
want the world to know you for that one thing, then publicly talk about that one thing all the time.
Right.
So a lot of time what happens is, what I see is that you build a niche and then you start talking your personal stuff out there. It's very easy to get uh, swayed by what other people are doing.
Yes.
You have to be very sure that if I want people to see me as a traveler, then 80% of the content that I put out there on social media or on the blog is about travel, at least 80%.
Right. Right.
So people in the mind space, that brand keeps building. And within that, now the given that we've been on the internet for about 10 years now, live, with a lot of people around, um, so the major niches are taken already. So if you are today trying to build something, you have to pick up a very narrow niche, which is your area of expertise. So for
Right.
example, your show is very focused on creating an Indic narrative.
Right.
Okay, so you are not going to you're not out to talk about anything and everything.
Right.
Or if even if you talk, you ultimately bring it back to that,
Yes.
right? So that's the way to go, to pick up a very narrow niche and be the best there.
Right.
And be patient. A lot of people, a lot of young people are not patient enough. they
Yeah.
they want the results yesterday. One episode out and I should be known to the world. I
Yeah.
mean, you need to build your body of work. You
Yeah.
need to learn from your failures. You will fail and you should fail. uh, so learn from those failures. I'm sure I mean, you can share. I'm sure with every show episode, you learn something new,
Oh, definitely.
what not to do in the next episode, or what to take care of, those kind of things. So be patient, build your body of work, and learn from your failures. I mean, that's how you learn. Nobody is born an expert day one.
Right. That's true.
No
And
matter how much you read and how much you learn from others,
right.
you have to make your own mistakes and learn.
Absolutely, and there's a great example of there's right now it's the biggest podcast in the world. It's called the Joe Rogan Experience, and one of the interesting things about that guy and his show is that he started doing like this podcast kind of setup all the way back in 2007, and
Wow.
it is only in like 2014, 2015, 2016, in these 3 years that his podcast really became popular and successful. And today in 2019, it is the biggest podcast in the world. But what people see is like, oh, look at this guy. He just, starts a mic and talks to people, and millions of people watch a show. But what people don't realize is this guy has been doing it for 12 years, you know,
Right. Like
12
they say, it
years.
takes about 20 years of hard work to become overnight success. That's absolutely true. And I mean, there's no shortcut
Yeah.
for most people. I mean, unless you are born to a really rich father.
Yeah.
For most people, you have to work your way. And also, these are spaces, for example, a lot of people say, where did you learn blogging? I mean, there was no place to learn. There's still no place to learn.
Yeah.
When you are the pioneer, when you are doing, you're the first, one of the first people doing things, you just stumble, and you learn.
Yeah.
And something that you've done becomes mainstream.
Yeah.
So and in the internet space, we are still in a very early stages of internet economy. So there is a lot of space to do new things which do not exist. We do not even know what they are.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of space to go out and create things which do not exist. For example, I'm still struggling to find a model for content creators which works besides the advertising,
Right.
because
Right.
advertisers will always come with strings. They always do.
Right. I think subscription could be a model that can be maybe realistically looked at. Maybe not right now necessarily, but definitely I think in the future there's this scope for it, because uh, I've started to notice that there are a section of people in India, in the West, so to say, there's people that will put their money where their mouth is when it comes to, if they want to support a cause, if they like something, they're happy to, whatever they want to pay to be able to fund it. In India, that sort of mindset is still developing, but it's there at a very nascent stage. And I feel like, in a few years down the line, that's something that could really develop.
That could, I mean, time will tell us.
Sure.
But why are we as a community not looking at a third, fourth, fifth, sixth model?
Sure, I agree.
That's where we are also not innovating.
Sure.
So subscription model is of course out there for anybody to explore. And if not many people are exploring, it is because we know the people are not ready.
Right.
Right. I mean, look at the newspaper subscriptions. Look at the data of how many people have switched, let's say, Times of India from their paper version to e-version. How
Yeah.
many of them are willing to pay? Not many.
Yeah. Yeah,
So if
that's true.
newspapers have not worked, then we are too small.
Yeah.
Most others are too small. I mean, in terms of content consumption, newspapers are at the peak.
Yeah.
The daily newspapers, and people, they have a ready audience, people who are used to reading those papers, people who are used to reading their columnists. So if they have not succeeded, then everybody else is very far off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, I think, there's some good lessons in here, and there's some good points in here, both in terms of sort of internet entrepreneurship, looking to create, uh, looking to create a career through the internet, looking to, and particularly also looking to travel, looking to expand your horizons through travel, looking to become a better person through travel, looking to connect with your country and your roots better through travel, which I think is something very, very important, in my opinion. Having been able to do it and experience it firsthand, I think it's an incredible experience to have, and I think it's a very important thing to do. And before we go, I'll leave you with the last word as well, Anuradha ji, in terms of, just reiterating the importance of traveling and its connection to rediscovering, or maybe just connecting better with your roots.
Okay, so travel, if even if I go by the ancient literature,
Sure.
it is something that you travel out to travel in, you
Right.
know, and even if you look at all the thinkers around the world, all the philosophers around the world, they were all great travelers, be it Adi
Right.
Shankaracharya or Swami Vivekanand or Guru Gobind Singh. They all were great travelers, and they were not traveling to show off that they are traveling. They were traveling to discover the world. They were traveling to discover themselves. So see, I mean, you can start as a normal tourist who wants to go and see places and click nice Instagrammable pictures, but also see that, are you traveling to discover yourself?
Right.
Ultimately that should become your goal. Are you
Right.
traveling to discover yourself? Are you traveling to discover the world that you are born into? you know and I mean, although we know about these philosophers and thinkers as great travelers, but if you look at successful people in any domain, be it businessmen, be it politicians, be it artists, they are all great travelers.
Right.
They're all great travelers. So, I think this is one of the basic things that hopefully should be a part of a university undergrad degree or something where people should be made to travel. I really like this concept called Jagriti Yatra, where people are, a lot of students are taken on a train throughout the country, and they stop at various places and meet the local entrepreneurs. Professor Anil Gupta of IIM Ahmedabad does a very beautiful thing called Shodh Yatra,
Right.
where they take a bunch of people and students to very remote parts of the country. And this is a yatra they do to learn from those communities. And they document their traditional practices and traditional wisdom. And they simply go as uh, bhikshuks, looking for
Right.
knowledge, and they travel with no comforts, with no paraphernalia. You just go by whatever mode is available, and then you walk through those villages, walk through those areas, and try to gather the traditional knowledge. So, a lot of these things probably need to be taken on scale. There is an opportunity for entrepreneurs as well to take up these ideas and build businesses around them.
Right.
I'll be happy to associate with some of them if some of them are willing to do. There's a lot of scope in India tourism space to build travel entrepreneurs. I mean, we have typical tourism travel agencies, which is nothing but creating a package out of an airline ticket and few
Right.
hotels and few small little things. But there is a whole space waiting out there to be explored in terms of creating experiences, letting people take a staycation where the people go and work out of a remote location, or even helping people discover themselves.
Right. Right.
So there's a whole lot of opportunity in the travel space, both as a seeker and as a entrepreneur.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's a great lesson for people who are watching today to take away from that as well. And I really want to thank you, Anuradha ji, for doing the show today. I think I personally learned a lot. There are people in the comments like Rudra Pratap Sinha who are saying that, Sham, please thank her on my behalf. Learned so many new things today. So yeah, so thank you very much for doing the show today, for teaching us so many new things, and for your insight. I really do appreciate it, guys. You can go check out In Details. You can go follow Anuradha ji on Twitter. I'll provide the link in the description as well. You can go check out the book Mouse Charmers as well. I'll provide the link to the book in the description as well. So please go check them out. I think you'll find them very interesting and very informative. And I think you might learn a thing or two from that too. So again, Anuradha, thank you very much for doing the show today.
Thank you, Sham, for inviting me. It was lovely chatting with you, and hope we do it again sometime.
Definitely will do. Definitely will do. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go ahead and subscribe to the show's channel. I will see everybody on Wednesday for the next episode. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon.